I've never been the kind of man to believe in ghosts, demons, or anything beyond what I can see and touch. But over the last few weeks, something has changed. Something is wrong. It started subtly, almost unnoticeably. At first, I thought I was just exhausted. I'd wake up feeling drained, like I hadn't slept at all. My body felt heavier than usual, as if I had spent the entire night running. My wife, Emily, told me I was overworking myself, that I needed to relax. And I wanted to believe her. But then the dreams started. They weren't nightmares, not exactly. Just strange dreams. In them, I saw our bedroom, but it felt different, like I was looking at it through thick glass. Everything was slightly distorted. I could see myself lying in bed, perfectly still. Emily next to me, sound asleep. And then, just before waking up, I'd feel it. A weight on my chest. At first, I convinced myself it was nothing. Just stress. But each night, it got worse. The pressure grew heavier, making it harder to breathe. And then came something else, memories I hadn't thought about in years. One night, in the middle of that suffocating stillness, a flash of something surfaced. A room. Small. Cold. A flickering light bulb swaying above. The smell of damp concrete. A feeling of helplessness. And a voice. Not a whisper, not a scream. Just a voice calling my name. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, but I couldn't remember whose voice it was. I told myself it was just another dream, but deep down, I wasn't so sure. The next few nights, the heaviness grew worse. It wasn't just the feeling of exhaustion anymore. It was something deeper, more intrusive. I'd lie down, close my eyes, and time would slip away. There was no gradual descent into sleep, no drifting off. One moment I was awake, the next, I wasn't. And then I'd wake up, or at least I thought I did. I'd find myself staring at the ceiling, unable to move. My breathing was shallow, my limbs frozen in place. The room was dead silent, no hum from the fridge, no distant cars, nothing. Just a thick, unnatural quiet. I could see Emily beside me, her slow, steady breathing the only proof that time hadn't stopped. I tried to call her name, to reach for her, but nothing happened. My body wasn't mine to control, and then came the weight. A crushing, suffocating force pressing down on my chest. It wasn't hands, wasn't fingers, just pressure. A force I couldn't see but could feel, sinking me deeper into the mattress. I tried to fight it. I told myself it was just sleep paralysis, a trick of the mind, but that didn't make it any less real. My ribs ached. My lungs screamed for air. And through it all, I could feel something just at the edge of my vision. Not a shape, not a shadow, just something, lurking, waiting. And just before I could break free, before I could force my body to move, I'd wake up, for real this time, gasping, my heart hammering against my ribs. The room normal again, Emily still asleep beside me. The weight gone, but the feeling remained. That deep, unsettling certainty that something had been there. Something had been watching, and I wasn't sure it had left. The next day, I felt like a ghost in my own skin. My body ached in places I couldn't explain. My head was heavy, my thoughts sluggish. Everything around me seemed strange, like I was seeing the world through a thick layer of glass at work. I would lose track of time over and over again. I would blink, and suddenly, minutes had passed. I would read the same sentence in an email over and over, but I couldn't understand the words. People would talk to me, and I would nod, pretending I understood. But I didn't, and I wasn't even there. Not really. The worst thing was the feeling, that nagging feeling of being watched. Even in broad daylight, even in a crowded office, I felt it, a slow, uneasy feeling running down my spine. The irrational certainty that if I turned too quickly, I would see something I shouldn't. But I never saw it. Not yet. That night I told myself I would sleep better. I avoided caffeine, kept my phone away, did everything the internet suggested. I even told Emily I felt bad, though I brushed it off. "Maybe you were just stressed," she said, running her fingers through my hair. "You've been working a lot." I nodded. I let her believe it. I let myself believe it too. But deep down, I knew this wasn't stress. This was something else. That night, the paralysis returned, same as before, the unnatural silence, the crushing weight, my body frozen beneath it. But this time there was something different, something worse. I could see Emily, but not like I usually did. She was lying on her side, looking at me, her face just inches away, but something was wrong with her expression. Her eyes were open, wide, unblinking, too wide. Her pupils opened into black voids, a mouth slightly parted, lips curved into something that wasn't exactly a smile. A frozen, sinister grimace. She wasn't breathing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to move, to push her, to wake her, but I couldn't. My body refused to listen. My chest felt like it was caving in. And then she moved. Her hand twitched. Her fingers curled slightly against the sheet. I felt my stomach sink. Her lips parted further. A sound escaped her. Low, guttural, not human. A ragged, labored breath that sounded wrong in the silent room. I tried to close my eyes. I didn't want to see anymore, but I couldn't. And then she lunged. Her body jerked forward, her face lunging toward mine, and I woke up, really, panting, sweating. Emily moved beside me, moaning softly. "Gladys, Connie, are you okay?" I couldn't answer. I could still feel it, that weight, that cold, that image of her face twisted and wrong. Just a dream it had to be. But when I reached out to reach her, my hands shook the next night. It got worse. I didn't even realize I'd fallen asleep. But suddenly I was awake. Or I thought I was. The room was different this time, darker. The walls looked weird, like they weren't really there. Just shadows pretending to be walls. And Emily flying, she was on top of me. I felt her weight pressing into my chest, her knees holding my arms. Her hair fell over her face, enveloping it in darkness. But I could hear her breathing, slow, deep, wrong. A hand brushed my cheek, too cold. Her fingers ran down my throat, pressing lightly, testing. I tried to speak, to scream. Nothing came out. Then she leaned in, closer, closer. And when the hair finally parted, it wasn't Temeline. The face staring back at me was something else. Something empty. Something smiling. A scream ripped through my throat, but it wasn't in my head. It was real. Emily snapped awake. "Asper Matthew," she gasped, grabbing my arms. I blinked rapidly, my chest rising and falling in ragged gasps. The room had returned to normal. Emily stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. "You screamed," she whispered. "Brett, you scared the shit out of me." I ran a shaky hand through my hair, trying to steady my breathing. Don't remember, but that was a lie. I remembered everything. And I knew that whatever was happening to me, it wasn't over the next morning. Something was different. Emily was in the kitchen, making coffee, like she always did. Sunlight streamed through the window, cutting sharp angles across the counter. Everything looked normal, but it didn't feel normal. She smiled when she saw me. "Morning, babe." I hesitated at something in the way she said it. Too cheerful, too casual set my nerves on edge. My mind replayed the nightmare from the night before. Her weight pressing down on my chest, her breath against my skin. It wasn't her. It wasn't real. But what if it was? I forced a smile and sat down. My hands trembled as I reached for my mug. "Bad dreams again?" she asked. I looked up. Her eyes were on me, expectant. She knew. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Something about the way she was watching me made my throat tighten, like she was waiting. Like she wanted me to say the wrong thing. I didn't. I just nodded and sipped my coffee, even though it tasted bitter, even though my stomach churned. Emily turned back to the sink, humming softly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't really Emily. The exhaustion deepened. Every night the paralysis returned. Every night I woke up gasping, sweating, feeling that invisible weight crushing my chest. And every night I swore I felt someone watching me. Not just in my dreams. Not just in the paralysis, but when I was awake in the dead of night, I'd feigned stare at the ceiling, listening Emily's soft breathing beside me. The distant hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock on the wall, and something else. Something just outside. My range of hearing, a faint shift in the darkness, a breath, a whisper. I started staying up later, afraid to sleep. The bags under my eyes grew darker. My hands trembled when I typed at work. My boss pulled me aside, asking if I was okay. I wasn't, but I lied. And then it happened again, the worst night yet. I was so tired that I didn't even realize I had fallen asleep one moment. I was lying there staring at the ceiling. The next, I was sinking deep, deep into a dream. No, not a dream. Something else. I was in my bed. The room was the same, but it wasn't. The shadows stretched too far. The air felt thick, suffocating. The sheets weighed heavy on my body like I was trapped beneath them. And then I saw her, Emily. She was standing at the foot of the bed, barely visible in the darkness. Just standing still, staring. My chest tightened. I tried to move, to sit up. Nothing. The paralysis had me again, but this time it felt different. Worse. Emily took a step forward. Slow, deliberate. "Emily," I tried to whisper. My throat barely worked. What are you doing?" She didn't answer. She stepped closer and closer, until she was at my side of the bed, looking down at me. Her face wrong too. Pale lips slightly parted, like she was about to speak. But no words came. And then she climbed onto the bed. Slowly, carefully, like she was testing the weight. And she crawled over me, her hands on either side of my head, knees pinning my arms, just like before I tried to scream. Nothing. She leaned down, closer, closer. And then she whispered something. A single word. I couldn't hear it, but I felt it. It slithered through my skin, down my spine, like something cold and rotten curling around my bones. And then I woke up. Or I thought I did, because she was still there hovering over me. But she was asleep. Her eyes were closed, her breathing slow and steady, like she had never moved. Like nothing had happened. I lay there, shaking, unable to breathe. Was it real? And she moved in her sleep. Had I imagined it? Or was something else? Something worse, wearing her face. The final night I stopped sleeping, or at least I tried. But the exhaustion gnawed at me, wearing me down until my body forced itself into brief, involuntary blackouts. Seconds, minutes, maybe hours. I'd wake up, disoriented, heart pounding, never knowing when I had drifted off. Emily noticed. "Mez be all you gearing me, Matt," she whispered one morning, touching my arm. "You barely talk anymore, you just sit there staring." I wanted to tell her. I wanted to say I don't think you were real. But what if she was? What if I told her and she changed? So I said nothing, just nodded. And that night, everything finally unraveled. I was sitting on the edge of the bed staring at the floor when I felt a shift in the air, like something unseen had just entered the room. I didn't move, didn't blink, just listened. Emily was asleep behind me. Her breathing was steady, slow, but something felt wrong. The hairs on my arms prickled, and then the bedsheets moved, just slightly, like someone shifting their weight. A slow, deliberate movement. Not Emily. I turned my head. My stomach clenched. Emily was still there, curled up, her face half buried in the pillow. But the blankets, they were rising and falling, like someone else was beneath them. Breathing. I couldn't move, couldn't look away. And then it stopped. The rise and fall, the breathing, like whatever was under there knew I had noticed. I swallowed. My throat was dry, very, very carefully. I reached for the blanket, my fingers curled around the edge. One pull, that's all it would take. One quick pull to see. A hand shot out. Not Emily's. Too long, too pale. Fingers curled like claws. It grabbed my wrist. I jerked back, and then I woke up, gasping, sweating. The room was silent, still. Emily lay beside me, undisturbed. It was just a dream, just another dream. But something was off. The air smelled different, like sweat and something faintly metallic. My wrist burned. I looked down and froze. There were marks, faint red indentations where fingers had grabbed me. I stared. My breath came short and shallow. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But I touched the marks. Still warm, still there. The blanket beside me shifted. I went rigid. Emily groaned softly, rolling over in her sleep. Her face turned toward me, her mouth slightly open. And then, in a voice that wasn't hers, she whispered something. Soft, muffled, but clear enough. "You're awake." A pause. And then, just barely audible. Finally, I stopped breathing. My mind screamed at me to move, to get up, to run. But I couldn't. I just sat there, frozen, watching, listening, waiting. And then, Emily's eyes opened.
Subscribe to our channel for more scary stories. We would love to read your comments. Which story